Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast. And as usual, I'm joined by Barry.
That's me. Has there ever been one I've not done?
There's never been one Barry's not done.
Same. Attribute all the success to this countenance. I should really give you another picture for the thumbnail, but I've never got around to taking them.
I think that's the picture of anything Barry's ever done on the show, because it's the only one I've got.
I just don't take many photos.
Well, yeah, we need to get that updated at some stage. I probably ought to update mine as well, but you know what? If you want to see our wonderful faces, you can always check out the video. There is a video component to the podcast. It's up on Spotify and YouTube, so you can always come and watch. And I put little things up there like the game's box art and the year it came out, in case you're interested. We've got, this is the 21st episode of Ready Steady Podcast, which is excellent.
Legal
We're still
to
going.
drink in the USA.
Exactly, in all states. So that's perfect. Actually, do they have federal drinking laws? Do you know what? Don't answer that. It's a tangent. We don't need it. In Canada, there's different legal drinking ages in different provinces, you see. But yeah, and if you're wondering why I don't have my usual wonderful camera set up and I'm not sat over at the proper desk, you can see I've been joined by someone here who has decided now is the best time for a snooze. And so I'm still here at my desk. So unfortunately, I do have the audio, which is the most important thing, but the video component is being shot on my crummy webcam at my desk. So apologies for the poor lighting and camera quality.
That's all I've got, Mike. So we're on a par.
I think yours looks better than mine, actually, to be fair. Your desk webcam setup looks better than mine.
Yeah, I don't know. This one's 1080. My 4K webcam looks terrible for some reason.
Well, I use a 4K webcam, and sorry everyone for a little bit of a technical tangent here, but I use that for the top down on the streams. And let me tell you, it's the futziest thing. It's really, really, really particular about where it gets plugged in and which sockets it uses. So I think if you're struggling with it, is it the Logitech Brio?
As maybe, I mean, I'd have to check I could probably find out. These old.
That's the only one. No, that's the most common one. It's the same one I've got.
I can't remember what drawer it's in.
But if anyone's struggling with their 4K Logitech Brio, my two top tips are: one, download the Logitech proprietary software, and two, make sure you have it plugged into a Generation 3 USB port or better.
Who knows? Maybe you'll get to catch me in 4K next next podcast.
And Mike's laptop is now creaking under the weight of editing these videos. And that was some good tangenting, some good general chat. So let's move on to the news.
What people have come here to hear.
I've only got one news article here, so I'll kick off with that, even though it's actually might as well be yours, because this is a new version of General Orders, which is an Osprey game that came out from designer Trevor Benjamin and David Thompson. I don't actually know much about it, but apparently you played the original. There's a new one set in Japan coming out called General Orders Sengoku Jidai in September this year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about the new one. The previous version was General Orders World War II, I think it was just called. And it was a 2-player, head-to-head, card-driven, sort of mini war game. You have a map between you and the other player. You have certain troops on your board, certain cards in your hand you can play to do certain actions. You take over locations, which will unlock abilities, which you can use, and all plays pretty quickly. You can get a full war, or at least a battle within the war played, I don't know, 20-30 minutes maybe once you know what you're doing. And I've not played it a lot. I did see this new version coming out and it looked interesting, but there wasn't enough information for me to see what's different. For example, in the World War II version, my very first game, I was playing against an opponent we played a few times, really liked it, and I did something they'd never seen before. I just dropped my paratroopers right on his cannons, and he's like, oh, I didn't anticipate that. I don't know what to do now. And then he was on the back foot the whole time for that as I pushed up forward and he was working behind enemy lines. So there is a relative amount of depth and tactics in that World War II version. I don't suppose there's going to be paratroopers in this version, so I'm going to assume there's going to be different locations that do different things. It might be more, I don't know what they'll do for the maneuverability aspect of it, but it was a good game. I have a lot of 2-player games though, so I wasn't too fussed for owning it, but I had a good time when I was playing it, and this one hopefully will continue with that. Unlike, I may add, the Undaunted series, which I did not get on with.
Fair enough. Well, I do really like Undaunted. I haven't had a chance to play the Undaunted Airplanes one, and I haven't had a chance to play the new one, Callisto, but it looks interesting. I'd definitely like to give it a try. But I adored Stalingrad. We played through that whole campaign live on the show, and it was fantastic. A really great experience, I think.
Cool. Well, I've got a variety of things we can cover. Keep the good stuff in, edit out the stuff that's not so interesting. The first is a few new games and expansions. So the first one is actually, I've written Lord of the Rings Pandemic, but that's not what it's called. Lord of the Rings Fate of the Fellowship. I had to quickly look that up. And this is a new game in the Pandemic system of games. So the core mechanisms are similar to that of Pandemic. However, there's layers added to it. This is Lord of the Rings. You get, I think there's 13 characters you'll be able to choose from. Co-op game. Got to get the ring to Mordor, one assumes. Using the Pandemic system, which is flipping cards, seeing where enemies are. Enemies can explode. In the original Pandemic, it's a virus that kind of spreads. In other versions, and I believe this one's most closely associated with Rome or Iberia. I can't remember what one people said it's most like.
If there's like
troops.
So Pandemic Fall of Rome is the version I actually have kept in my collection. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of that one. And yeah, it's got these sort of like roving bands of barbarians trying to take Rome. So I feel like that would be quite a natural fit.
Yeah, I think that'll be along those lines. Now, I've not played Rome, Fall of Rome or Iberia. I've played original Pandemic, and I've played Clone Wars, which was the first one in the Pandemic system series. I enjoy Clone Wars. I mostly enjoy Pandemic solo, because I'd rather be making all the decisions. I don't feel like there's enough going on that requires you to negotiate with other people as to what you should do best. I just think it's better if you're, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Whereas Clone Wars is at least a little different. I don't mind sharing the actions, the sort of what's going to happen. Well, yeah, that's a reasonable shout. Clear that out, because we're all working to sort of intermediate goals of taking down, General Grievous or Count Dooku or whatever. And a lot of things will get us there. So I'm interested. I mean, Lord of the Rings, this is, I believe, the 104th Lord of the Ring themed game on Board Game Geek. I'm sure some others have slipped through the cracks throughout the years. So, it's a theme that is overdone, perhaps, at this point. People complained about zombies a few years ago. I feel like everything's Lord of the Rings now.
There was Cthulhu as well, wasn't it? People were sick of Cthulhu, sick of the Cthulhu stuff. But I mean, I do think there is a massive overlap between board gamers and Lord of the Rings fans, or at least
same with Cthulhu and zombies. But
part of me wonders how many people are really big like H.P. Lovecraft fans, and how many of them sort of came to like Cthulhu because of the way it's presented in board games. Or sort of Arkham Files fans, or something like that.
Yeah.
But of course, with Lord of the Rings, you don't really have that same sort of reiteration, Like, I'm struggling to think of a chibi Lord of the Rings, But like Cthulhu's often presented as like a cute little, chibi style character as well. So it's been reiterated a lot more and a lot more extensively than Lord of the Rings has.
Yep. And I'll be interested to see what it's like, and I'll probably give it a go at some point.
Yeah, and one of the things I was going to say as well is people were hyped for this one because you mentioned Clone Wars, and that's designed by Alexander Orloff Tang. So it's sort of someone they've brought in who's used this proprietary system, which I guess Z-Man Games owns or is licensed from
Matt Leacock.
Matt Leacock, yeah. But of course, this one is designed by Matt Leacock, so it's sort of a return to the series for him, and people are excited by that as well.
Yep, nice. Something else I spotted just this week was on BackerKit, and that is the Legacy of Kain RPG. So Legacy of Kain, popular video game series, particularly throughout the sort of early 2000s, I want to say, when it first came out. Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, Shadow Reaver, and it's just had a remaster published. Hopefully we'll get some more games in that series. It was very enjoyable back in the day. And this is an RPG that has a lot of the what's the word I'm after? Not mythos, but the lore around Nosgoth and the characters in it, based on the Morkborg system, I think. So that's sort of more of an old school revival type RPG system. It doesn't give a lot away in the backer kit, but that world was something I was very interested in 20 years ago. Whether or not this can recapture the magic is a little unclear, but something I'm keeping an eye on, and I think maybe one person in our group will pick it up so I can have a look when it arrives. You ever play the Soul Reaver games, Legacy of Kain games?
No, Blood Omen rings a bell, but I might be thinking of the fantasy battles game Dark Omen.
Yeah. No, it's no Shadow of the Rat.
Were these like sort of third person adventure games?
So the original one was a not quite Diablo like isometric run around as Kain, but then they changed the series with the Soul Reaver game into a third person action platformer.
Yeah, Soul Reaver sort of rings a bell, but no, I never played any of them.
No, fair enough. Missing out. Forêt Soufflée, or Forest Shuffle. So I first noticed, a couple of days ago, I noticed the new expansion, Exploration, which gives you asymmetric caves. So caves are one way to score points in the game. You put things in your caves and earn points. This seems to be adding some variable player powers, which is something that Forest Shuffle didn't have. So that's, I don't know how much it'll affect the game, but it's a little something. And it also is going to come with obviously new cards, but a bunch of the promo cards. Now, as far as I can tell, Forest Shuffle is up to 28 different promo cards.
Wowzers.
Which is just slightly less than the number of expansions. No. And the time it's been out. 15 of them, including some new ones, are going to be in this new expansion. Some of which, I don't know, there's a very unclear list of what all these promo cards are. And I was a promo hunter myself, very annoyed that they're not getting them all. Apparently some can't be reprinted because of whatever publishing agreements they have with certain places. But quite annoying that you're only getting a few of them when this looks to be a way to catch up with them promos. Hopefully eventually you'll get them all, but we'll see how that goes. But then just mere moments before starting the podcast, a brand new base game for a shuffle set in the UK is coming this year, and that's Forest Shuffle Dartmoor. So UK forests, and as far as I can tell, the difference in this one is there are landscape cards, which I presume you can then play a tree on, or a couple of trees on, to get different bonuses and look for combos that way. So maybe it's the soil type, or maybe you're up a hill, or maybe you're something else. There's not the full rules as far as I can tell yet, but this seems to be an unstoppable expansion game,
Yep, Forest Shuffle. It's the new Carcassonne or Anything that has all those spin-offs and new base sets and whatnot.
New Wingspan.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we move on, I just want to mention the preview art they've got up for Forest Shuffle Dartmoor. I love it. It's great. Keep the sheep. It says, "This is not final art. It's going to subject to change." Boo! I love it. Keep it.
I think it'll probably be very close to the final one, but yeah, UK sheepsies. Whether or not that'll interact with the wolf strats, hard to tell.
We haven't had wolves in the UK for a long time.
I'm going to shuffle them all in.
Yeah, get the wolves out of the other one and just ruin the ecology.
I'm going to import some mushrooms illegally and plant them in the Dartmoor forests. Yeah, just as a throwaway, we've had Wingspan, we've had Wormspan, and now we get Finspan. So if you've been on any board game forums, you'll have no doubt, after the announcement of Wormspan, seen a number of memes around all the different Span games. Span being the ultimate end of it. But at the time, and when Wingspan came out, people were like, "Oh, it'd be good if this was for fishing." And Stonemare Games announced Finspan, which borrows some of the Wingspan mechanisms, but is actually a relatively different game. Marginally lighter, easier to get along with, but instead of birds, it is fish.
It's lighter.
It is. It's more. It's more. What's the word I'm trying to say?
Accessible?
Yeah, like it just is a little bit like you can do a bit more. You're not as constrained with this action triggers these ones. You know, you've got, I think it's 3 columns, and you trigger all your fish in the depths. But where you go and how you put them out, you've got a bit more time to build things up, or a few more actions to build things up, I think. And yeah, it's I've not played it, so I can't say definitively, but from what I've seen of it, people are saying that this is more streamlined, a game, easier to teach, easier to pick up, and a little lighter.
Interesting.
But still,
yeah, I haven't
fun.
seen much about it other than, the eggs were replaced with spawn.
Yeah, eggs is eggs. Eggs is eggs. I'll check it out. Probably not going to buy it. I didn't like Wormspan. And the thing I didn't like about Wormspan was the middle, like the shared rewards that were sort of first come first serve. The rewards in the middle as you moved around the guild thing in the centre, and if somebody pipped you to the post for something you were relying on, it annoyed me greatly for a game that's otherwise pretty solo. What you're doing. I'd much rather that if it's there, anybody could have it. Anyway, that was my thing.
Yeah, I mean, I skipped Wormspan because I was pretty. I didn't see anything. I mean, personally, I'm probably a bit more excited by dragons than birds. But at least that would have been my impression before playing Wingspan. But I do really like the presentation of the birds and the facts and the art of Wingspan and everything in there. I'm happy to never play Wingspan again, but Leanne likes it and I enjoy playing it with her. I've said that 1,000 times. That's why I've kept it. Yeah. I don't feel the need for a slightly more complex version, a slightly simpler version, or any variations of Wingspan, really. If I want to play Tableau Builders, I'd rather go into Race for the Galaxy, or I'd rather go into Terraforming Mars, or I'd play Wondrous Creatures again, or even Raising Robots, which I'm probably not planning on keeping just because it's a little too solo. But I am the kind of person when I play Wingspan that flips the round by round milestones to the competitive side.
Yeah, as well you should. My real question is, where is Wingspan South America? Been waiting on that for ages.
Is that a thing that's happening?
Well, it's going to be all 7 continents at some point, and South America is the next one. I don't know what the mechanisms are for that. It seems to be distracted by Finspans and Wormspans Just give me more birds. And then another older game getting a new lease of life is Love Letter Stories. So Love Letter, I don't know when Love Letter came out, to be honest, quite some time ago now. A small micro game, only 16 playable cards within it. Plays up to 4 players, and originally that was what it was. Then every re-theme of the game possible came out: Hobbit, Batman, Marvel. I think the wedding version's the most sought after or hardest one to get hold of. And then it grew arms and legs. Became less of a micro game and more of a normal game with variations on what the characters were within the cards. And now we've got Love Letter Stories, which is up to 108 cards. So like two decks of cards, standard decks of cards worth, and it is a progressive game. It's not exactly a campaign. It's definitely not Legacy. But when you play a game, that's going to affect which cards are in the next game with different abilities as you play along. So it is growing arms and legs. I don't know what all the abilities of the cards will be, but you're effectively getting 8 times as many cards or playable cards, maybe more, in this Love Letter Stories, and should be coming out sometime this year. Now, I actually have played Love Letter just this week. I played Wingspan just this week as well. Still fun for what it is. Doesn't overstay its welcome. I prefer the Batman version, or any version that might use similar rules, where if you use a guard to knock out a player, you get a point. Makes games faster, where it can marginally overstay its welcome if everybody gets to 3 wins each, and then you need another win to finish the game. But yeah, I'm interested in it. It looks like the old art from the original Japanese version.
I was going to say, I've got the original. So I don't know. The designer is listed as Senji Kanai. I don't know if that's their name or if that's the name of the studio, because I've got the Senji Kanai version of Love Letter. That's what it's called.
I think it's the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the designer, and that's got all the original art. And it's amazing. I love the art of that game. Love Letter is, it's a fun time down the pub as far as I'm concerned. That's what I'll break it out if we're at the pub and we need, to fill 10, 15 minutes. But the art of that Japanese version is really, really pretty. And they've used, I don't know if it's the exact same art, but at least some of the characters here look pretty much the same. But I'm actually happy with that because I think it's great. So I'm really pleased they've stuck with that style.
I think they'll take everything that they've kind of found that works and they've put it into like this story version where you can progress through multiple games where it's not the samey, right? You get something different every game. Could be cool. Now, little promo update for you. If you recall in the last episode, I was talking that I'd spent an exorbitant amount of money to receive 3 cards from Ludus Magnus Studios for completing my DEI collection. That arrived. Now, I'm going to preface this, and for those of you watching at home, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. But if you're just listening, I'm the kind of guy that buys art books, right? I've got a Geiger art book here. Tells me a little bit about Geiger. See all these art, pretty cool. I have a Gwent art book here. So the card game Gwent, which I used to play a lot of. And I'm interested in the Witcher world. I have an Arkham Horror. The art of Arkham Horror just kind of gives you a little bit of background. Some of the art from the Arkham Files FFG games, or it could be like movies. I've got Blade Runner 2049 art book here, along with a Sid Mead art book as well. And so I purchased, to make up the free shipping, the DEI art book. Because I'm the kind of person who likes to sit, get involved in the lore, look at the art, absorb myself into different franchises in that way. All of those books that I've just shown are fairly hefty coffee table style books. All cost between maybe £25 and £30. The DEI book also cost €30, so about £25 plus, give or take. And it is, shall we say, a little less substantial. So if you're looking at it on video on YouTube, you can see. But it's basically I don't know, like a handful of pages in a much smaller format than I was necessarily expecting. And then, I'm not going to give everything away, but this is a typical page, if you're watching again. But a typical page has a couple of sketches, the actual art from the game of the characters, and some of the least engaging lore. It's a paragraph written by the intern. Like, there's nothing here going on. Of the whole art book, there is maybe 3 pages total that I think... actually, that's not true. There's 4 or 5 pages total out of what's not a lot of pages that I think is particularly interesting. And the main one for that is the concept where they were thinking of using sort of propaganda art as art for the game. And they show how they've done that. And that was literally the only interesting part of the art book. And I was very disappointed with getting that. In addition, I'm just going to... We can cut this bit out, but I'm just slating Ludus Magnus Studios. In addition, I also bought the magazine that comes with the promos, and I was hoping for something interesting. It's their 10th anniversary, so a bunch of promos for games that I don't own, and the magazine that came with it is effectively a catalogue of all their games. There is nothing in here that's like a celebration necessarily of, you know, the people behind it, the ideas behind it, what was any kind of article that you might wish to read as for the magazine. It is just, here's our products, and nothing more. So overall, other than the fact I got the 4 promos that I was interested in, it was not I cannot recommend spending the minimum for the free shipping on their other products. So that is just my 2 cents on that one. But anyway, that was a small rant aside.
Well, you know, sometimes we need to have a rant, and sometimes people deserve to be ranted at or about. So yeah, we'll just
it was super disappointing that the art book. It was like, I like just knowing about the world and the thought behind it, and there was just, it wasn't good.
Yeah, sort of the opposite of the Earthborn Rangers lore book, which is actually like a short story of actual lore about the whole world. Like, it's almost like too much text, and it's like, more art, please. But no, I love that art book. I was really pleased to get it. It's the only, I mean, and I'm not a big art book guy. Like, I get, you know, they come with Kickstarters from time to time, but I'm just not particularly fussed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really glad to have that one. All right. Well, it looks like as we wrap up the news here, we do have a little bit of a sort of, not, I don't want to say update on our topic from last week, but just a few little bits to mention here. So do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, so again, browse through the crowdfunding platforms to see what's what, anything new, anything exciting. And something that caught my eye in particular was a game that was on Kickstarter just the end of last year, but is currently on GameFound, and that's Decay, like deck of cards, AY, Decay, the game. And I was just having a look, and it was a little unclear whether the art was AI or not. And I thought, well, I'm just going to have a look to see if they've disclosed that or whatnot. And so I went in and had a look through the comments, or had a look through the campaign, had a look through the comments, and the campaign itself doesn't show any of the art particularly close up. It's always sort of group shots of in situ or the covers type thing. And the more I looked at it, the more I thought, yeah, this is AI. But within the comments, somebody asked directly, is this an AI project? To which the studio, Ingravidos Studios, said specifically no, and named 2 artists that were working on it. So I went to look those artists up to see kind of the stuff they'd done before, and there was very little about them out there. The only things for one of the two artists was from 9 months ago, pretty much when the Kickstarter would have been getting kind of approved, and only has a couple of pieces from this project, and none of the art directly. They say they posted some up on Instagram. I went to their Instagram. There's no close-ups of the art at all, all of which made me dubious as to their claims of who these artists were and whatnot. And the reason it's important, or the reason it's kind of something I went to this trouble of looking up in the first place, is as I was scrolling through Kickstarter, all I saw was obvious AI art versus obvious AI art, obvious AI art, scrolling through it. Now, we discussed last podcast some of the specifics about why AI art's a problem, or could be seen as a problem to certain people, but almost everybody is at least disclosing it. If this is a case where it's not disclosed and it is, then that would be a red flag of sorts, and something that people do care about. And so you want to be an informed consumer. You want to make the choice as to whether you are getting AI art or supporting companies and artists directly. I will say that they have successfully delivered most of the Kickstarter, so you will get a product, I assume, if you back on GameFound. But whether or not it is what you think it is a little less clear. So
yeah, so I mean, it feels, I looked at their Kickstarter, and they raised something like 5,000, 6,000 euros, and to an extent, it doesn't feel great to be calling out smaller projects like this. I like the sort of the plucky creator side of this project, this hobby, and I like how independent creators can access the hobby and the demographic and bring even quite big and ambitious projects to life. But I think for all of my positive feelings about all of that, I do think it's really, really, really important to disclose whether or not you've used actual artists or whether or not you've used AI art. I hope that wherever you fall on, whatever side of the argument you fall on around AI art and the future of AI art in this hobby and the world, you can at least agree that citing your sources, citing your artists, crediting people is important. And, being honest about that is important. And, unfortunately for Decay, when I went to look up the credits on BGG at the time, Board Game Geek, at the time of recording this podcast, there were no credits. There wasn't even a listed designer, let alone a listed artist. So I have no way of knowing. I also did some Googling of the names that they provided. I couldn't find anything meaningful to indicate that any of these were real artists or real people. So all of those interrogations led to nothing. I scrutinized all the art on the GameFound page, and I noticed some curious anomalies in the art. That's not to say that these couldn't be human error. I don't know. There were just some odd choices and some strange sort of like pieces of clothing that didn't seem to really be part of anything or consistent. And I just think it's really frightening that we might be going into an area of product design where you don't know how much of this is created by real people and real artists and real designers and how much is just spat out by a computer. And we don't care about that. So, I just think that that's really alarming, and I don't feel good about it.
Yeah. And they're trying to hide it as well. Like, we're not saying definitively that's what's happening here, but even on their website, the signatures of the two artists are just different fonts. They are not signatures. And so it just all adds up to something shady going on. And I would prefer that we called that out when we've seen it. And if, if we are incorrect and there are artists They say they're not on social media, which could be the case. But you still have to. It becomes a sales point. If proving who your artists are becomes something that consumers are concerned about and interested in, it's something that publishers and designers have to prove, to my mind, and particularly in this day and age.
Yeah, and when I've looked up artists in the past, I've not found a single sort of artist who's trying to work as an artist professionally who doesn't have a website showcasing their work that you can link to, or an Instagram with all of their work. I think it's really upsetting to imagine that artists might not want to do that anymore because of AI scraping their data. But for the time being, at least, that evidence still exists. So it's surprising that I guess what I'm trying to say is it shouldn't prove too hard to produce something like that,
Yeah.
as evidence that you've hired a real artist or you're working with a real artist, even if they're your friend. Even artists who are not professional artists still tweet their drawings and things. They're just passionate about it,
Well, to that end, I think we'll find now on Ready Steady podcast that we'll also be mentioning the artist behind board games a little more frequently.
Yeah, along with their credentials as well. And we'll try to do more with the designers of the games as well, but particularly when real artists are being used, we'd like to make sure we acknowledge that.
Nice. Well, speaking of playing games, it seems like we're into that segment of the show.
Flawless segue. And now on to the fun part where we talk about what we've been playing for this week and what we thought about it. Oh, that's 2 weeks, actually. It's 2 weeks of what we've been playing.
Yep. Got a lot of games in, but most of them have been Board Game Arena.
You've got more than me, so would you like to start?
Certainly. Well, speaking of Board Game Arena, it is the Board Game Arena Awards, which will be done by the time this comes out, but been going for the last couple of weeks at least. And in order to vote on these awards, you have to play the games. Now, most of maybe like half the games I'd already played. Some of the games I'd played in real life and not on Board Game Arena, so that was easy enough to pick up. But otherwise, I've been working my way through the games in order to be able to give my vote. Perhaps I should just very briefly tell people what the categories and nominees were, and I'll give you what I voted for while we're there. So the best casual game, and your choices were Super Mega Lucky Box, Captain Flip, which I think was Captain Flip Spiel des Jahres this year.
It was a nominee. I don't know if it won. It might have.
I think it might have won. I'm not sure either. Castle Combo and Flowers. Now, all of these I'd played before the awards came up. Played an absolute ton of Super Mega Lucky Box during the alpha and the beta. It was stuck in alpha for ages. I don't know what the hold up was, but I played loads of it in that and had a good time. Captain Flip's a very good game and something I've actually been playing more and more of recently. Castle Combo
it was nominated actually for Game of the Year, Captain Flip. Yeah. But it did not win. Sky Team won.
Sky Team won. Okay, fine. Castle Combo is the most is the heaviest one of these games, but still relatively casual. It's easy enough to pick up. And Flowers was a game that other people liked a lot more than me to play, but it's fun. Like, you're making areas and set numbers of flowers on your tableau to get points. I voted for Castle Combo. Have you played all these games, Mike?
I've not played Castle Combo. I've looked at it and I thought that looks nice. But I just don't play BGA very often. So I looked at actually picking up a copy of Castle Combo and it's sold out everywhere. So
yeah. No, it's quite good. Voted for that. I think every game there, though, is worthy of playing, shall we say. Then the best regular game was Harmonies, which I think we've talked about in the podcast before. Cartographers, which is a little bit of an older game. Roll and Write. Loot, so that's Loot, game where you're a Viking Jarl taking over some territory, and Middle Ages, which was a very popular game at summertime last year.
That's sorry, I was just going to jump in there and say that is this based around the release dates on BGA then?
I would think it might be,
because Cartographers is like years.
Yeah,
old.
it's not a 2025. I think it must be the first published on BGA, because nothing else. The next category's got Terraforming Mars, right?
Yeah, so this has got to be when it arrived on BGA. Then.
Yeah,
Fine. Fair enough.
So new to BGA, but the best regular game. I find that's an odd selection to begin with. I wonder if it's based on how many plays it's had, but it can't just be that. Anyway, I went with Harmonies, but I'm not a huge fan really of any of the games in that category. They're all okay, but nothing there was like a standout for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted to play. Loot was the only one I hadn't played, and I thought it was good. Just never feel the need to play it again.
I haven't played Loot. I've played Harmonies. I've played Cartographers. What was the other one?
Middle Ages.
Okay, so I've not played that. I've played Majesty, which it's a reiteration of, I think. And yeah, I really like Majesty, actually. I probably would have voted for that if Middle Ages is as good. But also, I might have voted for Cartographers. I really like Cartographers.
I don't hate Cartographers. I played enough of it solo on the app. More so than...
I like it in real life because I've got a ton of coloring pencils and we just kind of sit and doodle. I like it when you swap your boards with the other players and they draw little monsters on them. It's cute and annoying.
Yeah. You're not one of those players got the stamps.
No.
Something for next Christmas.
No, I like the coloring pencils. I used to play it down at the local board games club with a guy who was like really, really good at drawing like artistry. Like I'd take away his like little sheets of paper and keep them because they were so nice.
So good, yeah. Nice. And then Big Boy Game Awards, so best expert game, and your ones in that category were Terraforming Mars, Darwin's Journey, Age of Innovation, and River of Gold. Now I've played a bunch of Terraforming Mars, both real life, on the app, and in BGA. Darwin's Journey was new to me, and I've now played that like 5 or 6 times. I think that's a very good game, to be honest. You played Darwin's Journey?
Oh, I've played it a lot, but only in real life.
Yeah. Like I played a lot. I've only played a 2-player or against the bot. I'd like to play a larger game, but I've had a good time with that. Age of Innovation, which is effectively Terra Mystica with extra steps, so there wasn't a lot of learning to pick that one up, but I had been wanting to play Age of Innovation for a while, and I think actually I'd like to play it more. Whether I prefer Terra Mystica with merchants to base Age of Innovation, I don't know yet. I need to play it a lot more. And River of Gold, which I previously played, didn't have a great time the first game, and I've subsequently played another sort of 5-6 times. So ironically, despite this being the Expert Game Award, all of these games are games that I've played more than any of the other categories, even though they're longer and harder to play. All of that said, I ended up voting for Terraforming Mars.
That's interesting. I probably would have voted for Terraforming Mars too. Let's talk about that.
Sure. Well, Terraforming Mars got my vote for a number of reasons. First of all, the board game arena implementation is the best implementation. It's better than
Terraforming Mars.
Of Terraforming Mars, yeah. It doesn't have everything. That's the only downside, right? But it's better than the app by miles. You can play 4 games in the same time it takes you to play 1 game on the app. Maybe that's not true, but it's a lot faster. It's a lot cleaner. The UI's better. It's just easier to work. You can see everything that's going on at a glance. There's no things hidden behind menus or anything like that. It's just super clean, super fun, super straightforward.
Do they have any of the expansions on there?
It's got Prelude, but I
think that's all they've got on the app as well.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I do have the app, but I've not played it much. Darwin's Journey, I've played 5-6 times now. Maybe more actually. It's good. Like, it's just a super solid game. The choices are fun. What you end up achieving is good. I've not mastered a strategy, whether that's delivering things to the museum. That's a lot of fun. Putting out lenses on the board, getting your objectives, working, wax seals for your workers. I've played enough games to see all of those things have a really strong chance at winning. And so I was really impressed with that in terms of the breadth of the game as presented to you was quite interesting. I understand that the Fire Island expansion adds a lot to the sailing track, which really elevates the game, is what I've seen from a few people, and particularly other reviews. That's not on here. So I think if that was on here, I might have ended up going with Darwin's Journey. But as things stand, whilst I'm still happy to play it, I think I've seen most of what it has to offer in its base game form.
So I've only had the opportunity to play the base game as well, which is very upsetting because I have the Kickstarter and went all in on it, largely off the strength of Simone Luciani as a game designer, who's the co-designer of Darwin's Journey. With Nestor Mangone, who I'm not a big fan of, actually. I find Nestor Mangone's games generally to be too dry. But Darwin's Journey, I really, really like it. I'm very happy playing the base game. I'd love to try the expansion stuff as well. I'm more than ready for it. It's just a case of finding some people who've played it before to sort of get it to the table with and explore that content. It's also one of these games, actually, that people were very hype about. So whenever I brought it out, I'd get a load of people who wanted to play it. So I've only actually played it at 4-player, which is why I'm very interested to hear about your experiences, because the setup, one of the things that sort of I note about the setup of the game is that it does have a very sort of modified setup based on player count. And one of the things we have observed is that it can be very difficult for a player in the 4th position to sort out their economy because the money's so important in the game and hard to come by. And the best way to come by it is to go to the museums. And part of the challenge of being the 4th player in turn order was getting those discoveries and being able to deliver them to the museum before someone else does. But it's not been such a big issue. And I haven't played it before. If I'm playing with new people, I'll just be the 4th player. I don't mind.
Yeah.
But it's not such a big issue that it's put me off the game. And I think I absolutely agree with you. It's just a really, really solid sort of Euro game. It's got nice tight timing considerations. The resources are challenging to manage, and there's lots of fun upgrades to do and things to think about. So yeah, solid game.
Yep.
And there's a Kickstarter for the new expansion live right now, but at the time of recording, it will have ended yesterday when you hear this.
Yeah, and that includes the golden tents if you're a returning Kickstarter backer, so get on that, Mike.
I will. I've already backed it. I've got my golden tent.
Very nice. I'd be keen to play more, and I'd be keen to play with the expansions and at higher player counts. It's a little bit of a bear to teach. It's everything's straightforward once you know, but it's just hard to get all that information over at once. It's a lot up front. For Darwin's Journey, but
yeah, it's one of those Euro games that sort of combo chains things. So you do a thing, and then it has a knock-on effect that lets you do more stuff. So you're looking for those sort of actions that chain into more actions. And if you struggle to follow very long chains of comboing actions, then you might not enjoy this one, I think. But it's not as bad as the Danny Garcia action comboing. But it's still, that's sort of what it's about.
It's still up there. Yeah.
Then
Age of Innovation. Obviously known about it for a while. Terra Mystica's one of my top games. Particularly with the expansions in it. And Age of Innovation was supposed to be not quite a Terra Mystica killer, but a built-in, more variable player power version of Terra Mystica. Most people, or the majority of people, prefer Gaia Project, whereas I'm very much turned off by Gaia Project. Age of Innovation is much more Terra Mystica, to my mind. And I think a lot of it's got to do with the maps. So Age of Innovation is also a fixed map. But the variety between changing up your character, your race powers, and your upgrade powers and stuff that you can kind of get on the fly, or combos that vary, give a lot of extra legs to the game, to my mind, for players that want that. You know, if you don't want those sort of rote style openings, depending on what other factions you're up against, but more something where you have to assess the board and what's available to kind of make your decisions, then this game does have that. But because I'm so familiar with Terra Mystica, you know, it was 5 minutes to learn the extra couple of rules. Trying to get the books was the only... There's an additional currency which lets you buy stuff in the form of books, and it was easy to pick up and start playing.
Yeah, I don't think Age of Innovation is going to be too much of a challenge for anyone that's very across Terra Mystica or Gaia Project. But I do think it is definitely an evolution of Terra Mystica for people that have played a lot of Terra Mystica.
Yeah,
you know, it's not one of the things it does. In addition to adding a new currency and a new board and sort of playing around with the cult tracks and things, is it makes everything modular. So at the beginning of the game, it starts with this sort of modular draft of the different factions, which now have sort of faction powers and races and things that have been comboed together during setup, and you're drafting them in reverse order or something like that. And so if you're not across how these games work, if you don't know how to measure the power of each different combination so you can draft sensibly right from the start, you're going to be already in hot water before the game's even begun. So I think it presents a lot of really interesting changes and combinations for people that are very familiar with the series. I don't recommend it as a killer of the others, part because, you know, it really is, I think, for people that are already quite familiar with this stuff.
Yeah, but I don't think, you know, you could learn it as your first game.
Yeah, you could, but I mean, again, you will have no way of assessing those modular races. And if you're playing with people who've played before, you're just going to have to ask them. Like, people are just going to have to be like, no, that's a really broken, powerful combo over there, so take that, you know?
Yeah. Which I'm sure people will be happy to do. But
yeah, if they've taught you Age of Innovation as your introduction to the series, sure, I'm sure they will be. Yeah, I mean, no, you know, they'll have to hold your hand. Yeah.
I need to play it more to really get to grips with it. I think, you know, a lot of people in my group played a lot of Terra Mystica, so I think I don't know if it's worth buying. That's the only thing. I've got all of Terra Mystica. I think that adds enough variability. But I do like what Age of Innovation adds. I just don't know if I need to own it.
Yeah, I've got all of Terra Mystica, and I've got Gaia Project, which I know you're not so hot on. And I picked up the Gaia Project expansion at Essen this year, which I haven't managed to table yet, but I'm excited to. I didn't buy Age of Innovation. What I liked about the sort of the variable setup with the different factions and powers and stuff, I wasn't a big fan of the introduction of the book currency and managing that and the blueprints and things. It just it didn't feel like it broadens the concepts, but I don't think it adds much strategic depth. I mean, I only played it once in real life. So, you know, maybe I do just need to play it a bit more to sort of come to appreciate that stuff. But I enjoyed it because I enjoy the system and I enjoy these games, and I'm always going to, sorry, the cat is biting me. I think I'm always going to enjoy these games, but I didn't feel the need to rush out. I didn't feel like it was doing so much for me that I needed to rush out and buy it. But as I said before, I do think if you've got a group that's played a lot of Terra Mystica, especially if it's a group that hasn't, for whatever reason, found Gaia Project agreeable, then this definitely offers a sort of another way to escalate the game without the need to transition to Gaia Project.
And then the final one in this expert game is River of Gold. So this is I think I maybe spoke about this podcast 9, 12, I don't know, a while ago. You should definitely go back and listen to them all, though, and then let me know in the comments.
Well, so long as we're doing shout outs, so I just had to go let the cat out the room. She's finally decided she wants to be done with me. I'm just going to check when you mentioned that so we can properly name it. And also, I did do a Ready Steady Played review of Darwin's Journey. So if you want to see that in a bit more detail, or you want to know a bit more about the rules, I talk through all of that stuff on the Ready Steady Played video on the YouTube channel. So that's, I think, quite a good way to find out whether or not Darwin's Journey is for you or something you might be interested in picking up. And I'm sure there'll be late pledges for the campaign they're running at the moment as well. So we talked about River of Gold on podcast 10.
Oh, so close. I knew it was in that 9 to 12 bracket. Mine like Steel Trap. So you can go back. Yeah, like my impressions of it wasn't super favourable. I didn't hate it, but I wasn't blown away by it. So I had to play it, or I played it again to get back into it, and I had a slightly better time the second time round. And then I played it again, and I had a pretty good time the third time round. Then I played it again, I had a pretty good time the fourth time round. Then I played it again, I went back to being a bit meh, and that's kind of where I am at the moment. So I played it like 4 or 5 times now. And the game's, I've got to a point where I'm better at teaching it, if nothing else. Like, there's only 3 actions. You move your boat, you build a building, or you deliver some goods. And once you kind of understand that that's the basic things you can do, and all the little bells and whistles and changes to those actions and what changes that things up, becomes quite straightforward to teach and play. I think I got into the levels of depth that the game had with these other games and understood the different ways of trying to force the objectives a bit more, what you're working towards, getting along the tracks better to score more points at the end, maybe working on the people you're delivering to, so you're getting better bonuses and better points at the end again. When the trigger of the Emperor is going to come during the halfway mark and the end of the game, and things along those lines. So I got to see a bit more of the game, and now getting to, let's say, the 5th game or so, now I'm kind of like seeing the limitations of that, in as much as it's probably going to be quite samey a lot of the time. What the main what's the word I'm after here? The shared objectives that you'll be competing for will vary game to game. The customers in your hand that you're delivering to will vary game to game. The buildings and the order they come out will vary game to game. But actually, there's not going to be a lot more to it than that. And that's fine for a game that you're maybe only going to play a couple of times a year. You probably bust it back out, and every time you play it, you'll be like, oh yeah, that was pretty good. I remember what I liked about that. But if you play it more in rapid succession, the limits of that kind of shine through a little more. Whereas Terraforming Mars, sure, same thing you could argue, particularly, base game where you've just got the one set of milestones and awards to compete for. So I think I'm actually voting for Terraforming Mars a little based on my knowledge of the broader game as well, and all the variety that kind of shows. So it's perhaps a little unfair that Terraforming Mars wins from that, but it's such a clean and fast way of playing the game that I think it kind of deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, I think so long as you're accounting as well for the BGA implementation, I can definitely see that argument. I played River of Gold with the patrons. We did a 3-player asynchronous game, and I had largely the same takeaway as you, actually. I really liked the timing considerations around the public objectives. I really liked the influencing the region tracks. That's a sort of it's just who's furthest up the track, right? But it's directly proportional to everyone else. So it's just a racetrack, basically. Get to the end with the most influence if you can. I liked the restriction imposed by the die. So every turn you roll a d6, and then based on the number shown on the die, that limits how far your ship can go, or who you can deliver to, or what areas you can build the buildings in. I really liked that. I liked the resource, which is faith, which allows you to adjust that die. And I liked how low the cap was on faith, but I also liked how you could sort of get more faith, especially if other people were using your buildings. I like that concept. When you build the buildings, you get some influence in the region, but also if other people stop at your building, whenever you stop in a region, you generate goods from all the buildings there, and some of them will be preceded at the setup, and some of them will have been built by the other players, and then the players get a kickback based on, if they built the buildings. That's all really cool. But I thought that the exact same thing as you, there was issues around the replayability. I thought the most interesting area for replayability actually was the client cards, because these are the contracts that you're fulfilling, the third action. And they all have different functions, and some of them will upgrade your ships to like royal ships that get extra powers. Some of them just unlock extra endgame scoring. Some of them allow you to generate faith more easily and more of it. And I just thought like there was sort of an opportunity there for some interesting sort of combo building and things like that. But I found, at least in our game, not only was it difficult to play a lot of them, and there is points for like really focusing on them. So I suppose that might be a strategy. There's like, it goes up to like 9. If you get 9 of these clients, you're going to get a big bonanza. I think we all played like 3. Albeit, we're all playing for more or less the first time. But I think the thing is you draw 2, and then during setup, and then when you fulfill 1, you draw 2 more and discard 1. So you just don't see enough of them. You don't see enough churn to really like sort of build into any kind of combinations or like powers that complement each other or anything like that. And so I thought, there's not like a lot of sort of strategic depth to explore there. It's just kind of, again, this opportunism. So there's not a lot of replayability there necessarily, because you can't deliberately set things up. And I think it's the same with the buildings. Like the buildings are just a sort of a flowing marketplace. And so I don't know. I think there's just not quite enough there to sort of get it to the table really, really often. Like I said, I like those. The presentation, by the way, is great. It looks, even on BGA, but you can see the photographs of it in real life, and it looks fantastic. I'd love to play the physical copy. I think it'd look gorgeous. But I just don't. I think that it's got some interesting timing stuff, but I feel like it's going to be kind of the exact same thing every time you play, and there's not enough moving parts to sort of really excite me about exploring different strategies and different possibilities.
I think you have to luck your way into some of the stronger strategies. There was one game where I think if we'd realised how powerful it was going to be, could be a runaway power problem. One of the nobles who upgrades your ship,
mm-hmm.
On the card it reads move up the tracks on any areas that your ship touches when you move it.
Mm-hmm.
And my assumption, and our original assumption, was you want it to be on one of the split levels so you can get 1 point on the 2 different regions that are adjacent. However, once we moved the boat, we realised you got 4 points in a single region if you stopped on one of the areas that had 4 buildings in that region. And so if you get that noble early and just sail, you'd just be accruing so many resources. You take a couple of turns off to fulfill another contract or to move to buy a building, but you're really trying to elongate the game, and you'd be at the top of all the tracks. So I think there was a potential couple. There's certainly some cards that seem to be more powerful than others.
Yeah, and when you
that seems
don't
more.
have a rotating marketplace, or like a
Yeah,
lot of marketplaces will be like the card that just came up costs 8, or you can take the card that's the oldest in the marketplace for free, slide them down, they get cheaper as people buy them. That kind of mechanism helps balance out cards that might not be completely balanced or might
yeah,
be situationally very powerful. So players can assess, is that good in this situation? Do I want to pay a premium to get first access to that because in this context, it's going to be really strong. But because it's just pure random top decking for all of those, you just don't, you can't account for any of that. So you might just luck into something. But the thing is, as well, like if that's procking off or if that's being activated by the buildings, then I mean the buildings are really good. Like people want to be building buildings. I don't think there's like a really strong incentive not to build buildings. And also, you don't want the person who's got the noble royalship to be building all the buildings either.
yeah, yeah. So
And
I don't know.
just to be clear as well, for folks at home, the building's the end game trigger. Like if no one's building them, game goes on forever.
Although if you are just moving the boat, eventually the buildings will cycle out as well. But anyway,
Oh, that's
yes,
right. Yeah, when it makes it all the way around the river, the marketplace like cycles a building out. But
yeah, yeah.
that would take forever.
20 turns, 20 river journeys later. Yeah. No, but that was the most interesting category, I'd say, and mostly where I'd spent playing a lot of games this last couple of weeks. There are another couple of categories that I'll run through very quickly. I'm aware I'm taking up a lot of the gameplay time here. The next category was the best 2-player game award, and in there was Altered, which is the sort of brand new CCG, and whilst the Kickstarter was running for it, you could play on BGA, and then they took it away, but now they brought it back with an official. You connect it to your account, and you've got your bought cards, your physical cards you can use within the BGA platform. So it's a proper platform for the CCG, which is good, but not a game I think should be in there. Splendor Duel, which played a lot of in real life and own. Pocket Cats, which is like a very light 2-player. You flip over a token and you can move it a couple of spaces. You want your cats to be eating the mice and not getting got by the dogs. At its core, just flip things over. And then another CCG, which is Bandai's Battle Spirit Saga, which looks, like between Yu-Gi-Oh! And Gundam type thing. And again, cool, like glad to play it, but there's so many better 2-player games on BGA that came out this year that should have been in there. And the only one that I could really vote for was Splendor Duel, because the 2 CCGs I don't agree should be up for the award, and Pocket Cats wasn't that good. So if you're on Board Game Arena, I'd recommend playing something like Pond. Pond was a great game. It was a little bit abstract. But anyway, I voted for Splendor Duel. I'm going to assume that you've not played either of the CCGs.
I haven't played any of these games.
Not even played Splendor Duel?
Nope.
Like Splendor, but different. Splendor Duel's good. My preferred Splendor play. And actually, Splendor's got the expansions now on Board Game Arena as well, which is okay. And then the very final category, which seems entirely arbitrary, is the best animals game. And in that category, we've got Mountain Goats, The Wolves, New York Zoo, and Cat in the Box. So Mountain Goats, I think I maybe talked about before. Super simple. You chuck some dice, and then you move your goats up those numbers from 5 to 12. And once you get to the top, you get a token for points, and collect enough tokens, you get bonus token. Get bonus points. And then you play with the mini expansion, which at some point you want to take a goat away from the main mountain and put them to the big mountain, and then you're competing for who can get the biggest number on the big mountain. Very straightforward, very easy to teach, very easy to play. Not a huge amount of strategy. but it's fun whilst playing. The Wolves, which are played in real life but had to relearn and play on Board Game Arena to be able to vote, is a area control type game where you're upgrading your wolves in a Terra Mystica style. You'll take things off your board for better player powers, but the trick is you can only activate certain regions, and those regions are based on double-sided tiles, 5 double-sided tiles in front of you, and to do an action you have to flip a certain number off that territory. So to move, you just have to flip 1. To try and gather a wolf to your pack, you have to flip 2, and to dominate somebody else's wolf, you have to flip 3. And timing it, you get 2 actions a turn. Timing it to do what you want it to do is the key part of the game, and then you're trying to take over territories at the quarter moon, half moon, full moon phase for the most points, in addition to removing things from your board, placing dens, placing wolves, upgrading your powers through the board. Decent. Had some fun with it in real life. The implementation on Board Game Arena is fine. It was just a little unclear that water sources should have read rules better. Water sources are not anything next to water. It's literally the middle of each island is a water source. So it took us ages to figure out how to upgrade to a layer. Which held us back. We're like, is this game broken? Is this not working? But no, it was. We just, because the moon tiles for scoring cover the water source. And it's not obvious where it is. So that's the only downside I'd say on that one. New York Zoo is broken on Board Game Arena and should not be in the category. We had to play it like 5-6 times to try and get to the point in a game where it would register that we'd played it.
Wow.
It doesn't work at 2-player. The quick start is 100% broken. You can't place the tiles down because as soon as you put another tile near a tile, it moves the first tile. And we reported the bugs. There's a whole page full of bugs on it. I can't tell you how good the game is because we couldn't play it. And then finally, Cat in the Box, which is one that I own, is a trick-taking game with your cards have no defined suits until the point you play them, and it may be that actually when you want to play a card, all of the cards are already out across all the suits. You cause a paradox and end up losing the round. Otherwise, there's you're trying to win tricks and place tokens out on a board. But in this category, I ended up voting for Mountain Goats because it's the one I've played the most. It sort of replaces Can't Stop for me, which will be the first game you ever play on Board Game Arena if you go into there. And it's very similar. You're rolling the dice, you're moving up the tracks based on the combination of 2 dice number that you roll, and you're trying to get the most points rather than control 3 columns. But all very good, very fun. Have we played Mountain Goats?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you played any of the other games in that category.
Well, I have played New York Zoo in real life, so...
Did you have the same problems where if you tried to move a tile, the other tile would move?
No, we didn't have any of those problems. I mean, New York Zoo is a little tile-laying game, sort of action selection thing from Uwe Rosenberg. So you will collect animals and put them in. It's a polyominoes. You're laying out the polyominoes to fill in the grids, and you're also going to put the polyominoes are the pens. You're going to fill them full of animals because it's a zoo in it. And then if you've got pairs of animals, they'll have children, and that's more points. It's fine. I thought it was the design was great. The product design was great. Very cute. The animal meeples were very nice. I really liked all of that. But the game was just dry as a desert, so I got rid of it.
Fair enough. Yeah, like my polyomino games, I've kept Barren Park out of all of them. I hadn't played New York Zoo. Arguably, I've still not played New York Zoo. But I knew it was kind of some comparisons just because of the tile laying aspect of it. But I don't think I'll be rushing out to pick it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
So yes, that's been much of my playing, has been online to get all those games played and voted upon. But it'll all be done by the time this podcast comes out, so you'll be able to check out the winners and losers.
Let's see if Barry called any of them.
I don't know if I will have necessarily. I think people... I'm voting for the games that I think. I'm not voting for what I think other people think.
All right, then what I mean to say is we'll see if Barry says the lines with the masses.
And I know it doesn't. But that was that. And I suppose in line with our new policy, of course, whilst not going to go through all the games, the ones that we spoke of the most was in the expert category. So that was River of Gold, published by Office Dog and designed by Keith Piggott. And the artist on that, which we called out as being a beautiful looking game, Francesca Berald, who also worked on Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, Frosthaven, and Oathsworn. Age of Innovation, published by Capstone Games and Feuerland Spiel, designed by Helga Ostertag, and same as Terra Mystica and Gaia Project. Artists on that one, Alvaro Calvo Escudero, worked on Doomtown Reloaded, Lord of the Ring card game, great game. And Lucas Siegman worked on Hallertau and Black Forest. Darwin's Journey, which was mentioned, just another Kickstarter, go have a look. Published by Thundergriff Games and designed by Simone Luciani, and the store, is it Mangoni?
That's what I've been saying.
Yeah,
I've been saying Mangoni.
Right. And the artist on that one was Paolo Voto, who does have a few other board games under their belt, but was a children's book illustrator who now kind of works just with Thundergriff Games. And then finally, Terraforming Mars, designed by Jacob Frixelius, published by Frix Games. Yeah. And the artist on that is credited as other family members, Isaac and Daniel Frixelius, but I think a big shout out probably goes to Stock Photos and
whoever took all the stock photos
and random filters. So at least
big shout out to Photoshop.
Lols. Anyway, sorry, that was a lot for me and what I've been playing, but surely you'll be having some fun in real life.
Yeah, so I've played a whole bunch of games in real life, but I'm going to keep it to 2 for this podcast, and I'll mention the others at the end. So in case you're interested, you can let me know what you'd like to hear about and what I should maybe give another chance to. Not that these are bad games by any stretch, but I definitely feel like I need to play a bit more before I dive into them on the podcast. But the first one that I've been playing in real life is Phoenix New Horizon. So this came out in this year, last year. This came out in 2024. What year is it? Good God. I picked this up at Essen.
Year. It's only January.
I know. I picked this up at Essen. It's a 1 to 4 player, 60-minute to 2 hour, sort of heavier end of middleweight Euro game. It is 3.27 out of 5 weight on BGG. And this is designed by Jorge J. Barroso, who is a Spanish designer and has designed Concilium Urbis, which I talked about previously on the podcast in the Essen Hype episode. I was excited to play it, and in the Essen Debrief episode where I'd played it and liked it. They've also designed Darum, Tito, and Graffiti Rush, but I haven't played any of those. And the artist is Jorge Tabanera Rendondo, who has 15 different board game art credits. And not yeah. I didn't write any of them down.
But Cities, Conservus.
Conservus, yeah, actually I spotted that one. Yeah, that was one a game you were interested in.
Yeah, solo only by Scott Alms.
Scott Alms, yeah.
Scott Alms, yeah. Yeah, I've still not played it though. So.
And the publisher for Phoenix New Horizon is Peroloco Games, who I think are very difficult to find games from outside of Essenspiel, and I don't know why.
Hmm.
But the Phoenix New Horizon is a sort of post-apocalyptic game in which you are a tribe of humans emerging from the bunker or the vault or wherever you've been to rebuild humanity on the surface and to try and make it relivable by creating these things called I'm going to say regenerators, but I know that's wrong. They were called something else. It is
No,
it
you're
is a
right.
Euro game. It's got two main boards. One is a big old map of the world, abstracted part of the world, and the other is a action selection board. And so there's two sort of chief conceits here. On the main board, you are building these regenerators, and then you're also building buildings. But the buildings have to be adjacent to the regenerators. It's not a spatial puzzle. It's just first come, first serve to different spots. And then the action selection board is the really sort of unique offering in the game, because what you've got is you've got three commandos, they're called, which are functionally your workers. And they exist in these rest spaces at the beginning of each round. And the game is something like 6 rounds, and then it ends, and whoever has the most points wins. But you've got a commando leader who has a little nuance that I might explain later. But that's not really the point. The point is the commandos exist in these rest areas, and each rest area is adjacent to actions that exist in the game. These actions are the things you want to be doing, like building regenerators and building buildings and improving your income tracks and things like that. And when you want to take the action, you move the commando from the rest area to the adjacent action, and that triggers it. But what you can also do is spend the currency of the game, which is fuel. It's the only currency in the game, in order to upgrade the workers. And they move from their current rest station along a path to a higher rest station, an upper level. There are 4 levels. But the upper level rest stations are adjacent to fewer actions, but they're better. So as you ascend the levels of this route, the actions you can take becomes more limited, but you can take better versions of them. So that's inherently interesting. When it gets to tier 4, you get to the most powerful actions in the game, but you get to take that once, and then the commando falls all the way back down to the bottom level. And can go again. So you get like another action that round, which is also exciting. There are shortcuts. So if people take all the actions you want in specific locations, then they actually unlock a shortcut for you to jump up to level 2 without having to pay the fuel cost. And there's all kinds of various sort of like little shortcuts and instant triggers and things that play with the timing around when you're going to get to take the actions, because everyone's in the same rest area, so it's always timing, right? Like you're competing to take the action you're trying to hedge, like, is someone going to try and take the action I want before I'm going to get it, or can I wait and take that action later? Or maybe if these players play into these other actions, they'll unlock this shortcut. I can go get a better version of that thing. So there's a lot of sort of interesting timing considerations and stuff going on. It's a really, really compelling system. It's really weird and unique. It's very abstract. It's very hard to justify why these 4 groups of people who are trying to rebuild Earth and repopulate Earth and revitalize it are competing for actions on an abstract board. I don't know what it symbolizes. The art on the board looks kind of like computer interfaces with wires connecting it. It's like they came up with a cool mechanism and they just couldn't thematically justify it, so they didn't even try, which is fine. Like, it's a compelling system, and I'm okay with that. But if you really need theme to get into a game, you're going to find this a stumbling block for sure. But other than that, it's just, the game also has just tons of tight timing considerations. So, you're trying to build out these regenerators everywhere, and those spaces are going to go. You're trying to build the buildings. The buildings have to be adjacent to regenerators. If you build them under someone else's regenerator, then that person gets a little kickback benefit, just like a bit like the buildings in Well, exactly like the buildings in River of Gold, but it's just it just came together to be sort of a really tight package. And the art was really, really nice. It was really well presented. It's got loads of wooden pieces, which are really appealing. And what you're trying to do to score points is to get access to these objectives, which are like, for some reason, they're like radios. And you randomly deal out the radios all around the board. And so you can access them in different ways. It's actually, you access them by releasing your population. So you start with population on your player board, and various things you'll do on the game board will, throw a person out. I guess it represents them coming out of the vault. And then if you're lucky, you can pop them onto one of the radios. You'll sort of unlock endgame scoring for whatever that radio does. It might reward you for having built the regenerators or, certain buildings of a different type. And each radio has 3 spots on it, which are first come, first served, and also de-escalate in points value. So the first one to take that particular radio will have most points for that thing at the end of the game. There's also a bunch of contracts that you can fulfill, like missions and stuff, and those are quite important to do. And various other sort of familiar Euro mechanisms. There's a whole track which your little population can run up and collect bonuses as they go. And at the top, more radios to activate. But I was just I played it at 4. BGG says best at 2 or 3. I definitely think that depends on your crowd. I was playing with a group of people who are just super across Euro games, and for them it was just like, no problem at all, and we played it pretty quickly. I do think it could, if you're playing with sort of very like AP prone players, it could really slow down. I also think if you're playing with people that are sort of quite across it would go along at a pretty good pace. But there's a lot to think about and a lot to sort of crunch to get into. And I really liked the asymmetry in this setup as well. There's quite a lot of extra radios and things to just zhuzh up variable setup.
I mean, I'm looking at the pictures, the images on Board Game Geek, and there's a lot there.
Yeah, it's very colorful. It's very sort of neon. It's got this sort of anarchic, sort of punky, but also like sort of cutesy, meeple-y type sort of presentation. And the other thing I'd mention actually was there's quite a lot of stuff that wants to count how many buildings you've got. And that's the one thing that I wish they'd figured out some way of doing better, because the actually being able to eyeball where your buildings are on the board and what you've actually got, it's quite difficult. Like, it's quite a busy board, and your buildings can be quite spread out across it. So that's a little tricky. I wish there'd been a sort of a way to, like, maybe just trackers to count up on your player board what you'd put out or something like that. But,
Is every empty space on your player board not a building?
No, so your player board has a bunch of empty spaces, which are simultaneously buildings and regenerators, and they can't have these just formulated into sort of side-by-side tracks, because there's all these sort of little bonuses and things that unlock as you build stuff, and it's all kind of interconnected with little wires and things. So if they tried to present it as just and also it's sort of unlocked by another track that it's next to. So maybe there was a way to do that with graphic design that would make it simpler to calculate what those buildings were, or where they were on what they were giving you from their position on the board. But as it stands, there's quite a lot of information already on the player board.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I thought, really sort of nice, crunchy Euro puzzle. Definitely happy to play it again. Played a few more times. I'd be interested in trying it at different player counts, but I thought it worked great at 4. I'm definitely happy to play it again at 4. This one's, I think, a solid recommendation if you're into these sorts of heavier Euros with some amount of player interaction. And the kind of folks I was playing it with are, people who are into your Terra Mysticas and your Barrage and stuff like that. And they all really liked it. So, I think it's going to be a hit with that sort of crowd.
Nice. We'll give it a go. In addition to playing online, I did finally play a physical game or two, and did get bus finally to the table. Had enough players to play bus. You need 3 minimum. Goes up to 5. I only had 3, but I thought that was enough just to see what it's like. But I think it would be better at a higher player count. But bus is the 1999 game from Splotter, Jeroen Duman and Joris Viersinga. Whether I'm saying that correct or not, correct me in the comments. And the art for this, got the artist in, but I'm unclear which edition.
So these are the original bus from '99. All the art was done by Joris Viersinga. These are the artists from the version you probably played, the new capstone one,
which is not bad looking, certainly comparatively to the 1999 version. So
there's some people that love that original one, but
yeah, well, I have seen some very interesting fan arts, fan boards, fan designs that I thought were pretty cool. But this new version is both functional and pleasing. I wouldn't say it's too gaudy or in depth or anything like that, but the art is nice and appealing. Let's put it that way. So Thies van Paradon, who worked on this, and Wildcatters, and Dan van Paradon did the same, as well as the Estates and Coffee Traders. But yes, this is an older game, right? 25 year plus. The version I have, I don't think it's the new version, but I don't think it's like the 25th anniversary version. And in this game, you are building routes for your bus to be able to deliver passengers to their homes, the office, or the pub. Those are the 3 locations.
Yeah, the 3 areas of life.
Yeah, and depending on the time of day, depends on whether people want to go home, to work, or the pub. And
people are very routine in this game until they're not.
They're very like clockwork. You can tell exactly what they're going to be doing. And basically, each turn is a worker. It's an interesting form of worker placement because you have limited workers. So for the whole game, each player only has 30 workers, I want to say.
20 workers.
20 workers. Each round, you must place 2 workers, but you may place additional workers. So that's the first interesting element and sort of unique element I've not really seen taken up by worker placement games more broadly. The second element is the order of activation on the worker spot. So each spot can be taken by multiple players. But the first person to a spot typically gets the best ability, or the biggest ability, whereas subsequent workers there get diminished versions of it. However, they don't always resolve from the first player that's there. Sometimes if you're the first player there, you'll be the last person to take the action, though you'll always get the most for being there first. And so the actions are to build new lines, to build new buses, to place new buildings, to ferry people about, to decide whether or not time advances. So people will go to work in the mornings, the pub in the afternoons, and come home. Well, maybe that's the other way around. Maybe they're at home in the mornings, work in the afternoons, and pubs in the evening. Time will always march on at the end of every round. However, you are able to stop time if you want to deliver people to the same location a second time. And is there one more action I'm missing?
Yeah, there's the first player marker.
And the first player marker. And being first player is important.
Yeah. Well, and you missed the bus fleet as well, I think, but actually, I don't know if
making a bus. Now, the interesting part of this is that, or another element for the game, is that the workers are placed out, everybody places workers, and only when they're done are the action slots resolved, in a very specific order.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite forms of worker placement where everyone goes around the table taking turns placing workers, and then all of the worker placements, after everyone's done, all the worker placement spots are then activated, and there's some kind of timing wriggles that upset, that you've had to be thinking about and might be upset by what other people did. It's really tricky to explain, right? Because what you're functionally trying to do is there's two areas of the map is a series of routes, and at the beginning of the game they're all empty, and the world's your oyster. You can build whatever you want and feasibly go wherever you want, but the minute the game starts, it's all going to start filling up with people's routes, and then they're going to be jostling up against each other, and your route and your areas are going to be completely upset. And what you're trying to do is link those two subway stations where people start to appear with the buildings all around the board, ideally linking them so that you have access to the buildings people want to go to when they want to go to them, right? But then the wrinkles start to come in because you may not get to the buildings you want to get to because other people are building routes in the way. You may not have enough buses to pick up all the passengers that you want to deliver, because ultimately you're just scoring points. 1 point per passenger delivered. And ask anyone, 4 points is a good score in bus, right? So then you're also to sort of further upset this paradigm, right? You might think everyone's going to go to the pub this round and you're planning around that, and then someone stops time and now everyone wants to go to the office, except a lot of them are already at the office because they were already delivered to the office because time stopped. So now only the people who have access to offices where no one is could deliver new passengers that just showed up or passengers that didn't make it to the office previously. So it's there's that wrinkle. But the additional wrinkle as well is that you only get to deliver people if you take the vroom action. And if you're last in vroom order, people are going to pick up all the passengers and deliver them to all the pubs or the office before you get to pick up the passengers. And if their network moves away from yours, they might deliver them to pubs or bars that you're not even near, and then they're off your network and you'll never get them back again. It's so much to consider, and you've really got to think about the timing of everything and what you're going to have access to and where people can build a route to potentially take passengers away from your bus network onto their bus network. And furthermore, everyone's building buildings, and the buildings are somewhat sort of sequential. So the map is divided into zones, and the zones have to be completed. So once all the zone 1 building spots are occupied, then they start building in zone 2 and zone 3 and zone 4. And you may fill up the whole board with buildings, and I actually think that's one way the game can end. But typically it ends when somebody runs out of workers.
Well, when only one person has workers left.
Yeah, only one person has workers left. That's right. Yeah. So you can also, if you spaff through all your workers too quickly, just be sat out of the final rounds of the game, which is really not good. So you don't want to do that. You might be hoping to build some pubs along your route to score pubs next turn. And then someone takes the build action and they're like, oh, I've got an extra building I don't know what to do with. I'm just going to put an office or a house on your route, where you wanted to build a pub. So sad.
Yeah, so you get no passengers next turn. Actually, that's the other action. More passengers.
Yeah, there's more passengers. So there's introducing more passengers into the system. There's building the buildings. And then there's these super important actions. Well, vroom is really important. Getting to go first with the operating of the network at the right times is absolutely crucial. But what's great about this game is quite often there are multiple absolutely crucial things that you need to be first on right now, and you just can't.
Yeah, you might think we said vroom action is important, that's how you get points, delivering passengers to locations. So maybe you think, oh, well, I'm first player, I'm going to take that action first. But then suddenly somebody's taken the build lines action, and by the time you get to it, there's no lines to be built because of the diminishing return on the position on that action. And so they're like, well, maybe I'll get some buildings on my future lines, but somebody else is going to put all the passengers on the other side of the board where you don't have any routes. And you want to be first in everything, but that can't happen.
Yeah, and so there's got to be a real sort of the game forces you to be exceptionally savage about what you prioritize, because if you're going to take vroom first, you're probably not building good routes this round. You're probably not upgrading your bus fleet. You might not even get to build many buildings or any buildings at all. And so you've just got to, on the turns where, like, if you were looking at Vroom and you're thinking, I could take that action to turn on my buses this round, but by the time I get to take it, the passengers are all going to be gone, or all the pubs are going to be filled up, because each pub can only have one person in it, just like houses and offices. Only one person per house and office and pub. So if somebody delivers a passenger to a pub that your network also visits, then you can't deliver there. So you want to be ahead of them on buses if you can be. If you're not going to be, maybe it's better to spend this round not doing that and just focusing on developing your network or putting out buildings for the future. And that's where you start to think about, okay, well, we're going to be doing offices next time. So I'll put out some offices now that only I have access to. So hopefully I can do that next. And then, of course, some dickhead stops time and it's not going to happen for another round.
Like, it was the things you had to think about and what you wanted to be doing and the order of execution and the planning for it was what I thought were the very clever parts of this game. As I said, I only played 3 players, so it wasn't until like that final round or two where people were really getting in each other's way with the routes. I think it would be better up for maybe even 5 players to get out there. We also didn't realise we had to touch the stations to begin with. So everybody was building around Central, and then we're like, wait a minute, there's going to be no passengers this time. And so we started a turn behind, but then we got it. And overall, I think people enjoyed it, but I don't think the other 2 players I played with really saw the potential of the game for what it could be once everybody was kind of on top of it and cutthroat enough about the order of what they were going to do things or how they were going to do things. And I think that this is the kind of game that has pretty limited rules, pretty easy to teach once you know them, other than the odd what way can you build your routes when other people are there rules. And the emergent part of the gameplay where people were like, well, okay, I'm first player, I'm going to improve my fleet. And somebody's like, well, in that case, that means there's going to be additional actions later on, so I'm going to take the Vroom. And that person's like, well, I'm going to build routes in your way first, or lines in your way first. I'm going to take that first. Just, it seemed like a super clean, super engaging and interactive type game without being directly confrontational.
Yeah, I think it's definitely all of those things. I'm actually just looking at the podcast notes here, and I can't find a mention of Bus previously, which is funny because I've been playing it quite a lot. Just because there's quite a few people at the one of the clubs I visit here who really like it, and so I've been playing it 4 and 5 players, and we actually got through a 5-player game of Bus in like 90 minutes. So if people are across the rules, it's not like a super long game. It doesn't have to be a super long game. And I think that the amount of sort of crunch and tense decision making you get for the rules overhead and the bot and the rules overhead and the time to play is exceptional. I think it's like, one of best in class, probably. Having said that, it is a very interactive game. It really is all about eyeballing the board state, reading the geometry, being able to prioritize things. It's not a game where you can sort of sit down and do the math and win. It's the opposite. So, it's very sort of tactical. You should have some kind of strategy in mind, but you can't be too married to it. Once someone blocks you off or gets in your way or stops you, because each street on the map can only contain one bus route unless under a few very exceptional circumstances. So typically, the minute someone builds across a road you wanted to go on, you're going to have to turn your bus route in some other direction. And if you'd build a long-term strategy around going one way, then that's going to be really bad news for you and potentially unrecoverable. But the game's quite short, right? It's also quite a low scoring game.
Overall, the score track only goes up to 10, I think, and our game finished 4-4-0. That was with it was 6-4-0, but I had 2 time stones dropping me down to 4.
Yeah. So every time you stop time, you're forced to take one of the time stones, which is a negative point at the end of the game. And also, if the time stones run out, I think there's 4 of them. If they run out, the game ends.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Bus is fantastic.
On the same turn. We used up all our workers. Time stones ran out. Nobody got any points. Great game.
There's nothing better than spitefully stopping time just so like one opponent gets like 1 point and everyone else is just sat there glum faced like, oh man. I think it's fantastic. I love Bus. I'm happy to play Bus anytime, and I can fully understand why it's been in print for 25 years.
Get it played. Yep.
All right.
Do you have any games that are any newer than 1999?
I do. I have a game that came out this year, 2025, wow. Which is this year. And what I've been playing is The Crew, Fellowship of the Ring. No, I'm sorry. The Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game. It's 1 to 4 players. It takes 20 minutes to play, which is kind of untrue. It's 20 chapters long. It's a sequential journey through the first Lord of the Rings book, and it's 20 chapters, and each chapter is probably 10 to 20 minutes to play. The weight rating is 2.11 out of 5, and it's designed by Friam Bomuller, who works at Office Dog and seems to have worked in board games for a long, long time with credits at Fantasy Flight and a bunch of other studios, but has not actually got any design credits other than this one. So I guess first full design credit for Friam Bomuller. The artists are Elaine Ryan, who I looked up because this is their first board game, but they've got a website full of their art, and a lot of it's really fun and cool. I liked it. And Samuel Shimoto, who is a longtime graphic designer and artist in board games, worked on tons of stuff. And this is published by Office Dog, which is a part of the Asmodee brand. And so what you're doing in the Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game, is it's a cooperative trick-taking game, which is why I've immediately compared it to The Crew. It's got a lot of DNA in common with The Crew. It can be played 1 to 4 players. BGG said it was best at 4. I played it at 2. And when you're playing it at 2, you have a sort of a third faux player. And functionally, so we played 4 chapters of the game, roughly a fifth of it. And what you're doing is you are trying to get the ring from Hobbiton to Mordor, but you're only going a third of the way in this one. So you've got characters from the book. It follows the book. So there is a chapter with Tom Bombadil, and Farmer Maggot and Fatty Bulger make appearances as well. But it uses, it's got all its own art as well, and the art's fantastic. The game is really well presented, and the components were nice as well. So straight off the bat, it looked great. And you've got a sort of a set deck of cards that's in 4 suits, numbered 1 to 8. And so it's just very much like set up for trick taking. And then each chapter is going to introduce some wrinkles, right? And the way this works as a core concept is you're going to have 3 characters. I don't know how the solo mode works. I didn't play it. I didn't look at it. But in the 3 or 4 player mode, everyone's going to have a character, each with their own objectives that must be completed. In the 2-player game, each player has a character, and then there's the third character, which has some cards that are set up in a pyramid, not unlike Seven Wonders Jewel, or another Lord of the Rings game, Jewel from Middle-earth, where you've got this sort of pyramid of some face-up and face-down cards. And players will have to sort of account for that in the trick that they're currently doing. So one player is always going to be Frodo. Frodo's in the whole thing. And Frodo's got this objective of collecting ring cards. Sorry, I said there were 4 suits. There's 5 suits. But the ring suit has only 5 cards in it. So there's the 1 ring and then some other rings. I can only assume 4 random rings of power. I don't know. Maybe they're fake rings or whatever. There's Frodo's objective that must be completed is to collect 4 ring cards. They need, I think, more ring cards at a higher player count. I'm not sure, but I just like this concept that so the number 1 ring card is the 1 ring, and then the other 4 are just like random rings that I guess Frodo got mixed up with. You know, he's come away from home with like 5 different rings. He can't tell them apart anymore. So he's like, I better hang on to all of these. But Frodo's objective is to collect 4 ring cards out of 5. It doesn't need to be the 1 ring, apparently. That's optional. But you really want, if you're Frodo, you will have the 1 ring, because everyone gets dealt a starting hand of cards, and then whoever has the 1 ring in their hand will become Frodo, which could be in a 2-player game, the fake player. If both you and your opponent are like, or you and your teammate are like, we don't have the 1 ring, it's like, oh, well, I guess that pyramid is Frodo now. And then you pick other characters. So each chapter introduces some more character cards. So there's little envelopes to open, which is always exciting. In the first chapter, I don't think this is spoilers because you're going to have to open these up to play the first chapter. Like, you can't play the game without this stuff, but it's Gandalf and Bilbo are there, right? Because you're leaving the Shire. It's, Bilbo's birthday. And I can't remember exactly what their objectives are, but, it's going to be things like win the fewest tricks, or win at exactly 1 trick, or, collect, win a trick with a number 8, stuff like that. Very reminiscent of the objective cards from the crew, only now they're tied into specific characters. And so once somebody's been identified as Frodo, the other players or the other player and the fake player will pick characters. You'll assign the fake player a character that you think is achievable. And then you'll just start playing tricks in order to meet the 3 objectives. And as you move through chapters, they start to introduce more mechanisms and harder objectives and make it more challenging. We found chapter 3 was the most difficult of the 4 we played. We had to have a few attempts at that in order to win it. But overall, I really, really enjoyed the 4 chapters. I could have happily kept playing it after we got through those 4, but we had a bigger game to play and we're running out of time. But I really, really, really enjoyed it. So I think if you like the crew, if you like Lord of the Rings, if you like trick-taking and cooperative stuff, I think you'll get a real kick out of this because it looks great and it's really cheap and it's a lot of fun.
Nice. I own this also. Did you get the Galadriel promos?
I did. I didn't buy it, actually. Someone else bought it, but they didn't have that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've not played it yet, so I can't really give much of an opinion, but I do enjoy the crew. Deep Space and Deep Sea. Is that what they're called? I don't know. No, it's Quest for Planet 9 and Deep Sea, is it?
Yep, that's right.
Mission Deep Sea. Both of those. Mission Deep Sea. There we go. I feel like I have another cooperative trick-taking game.
Is it Sail?
No.
Sail's another cooperative trick-taking game. If you like the crew and you're not averse to the Lord of the Rings theme, then this is like a no-brainer. If you're like, I wish there was more crew. Well, there is more crew. It's this. I think it works better at 2 than the crew did. Not that I've played the crew much at 2. We've sort of tried it out and we're like, yeah, this isn't really great. I've mostly played the crew at 3 and 4. So I really like the crew at 3. It works fantastically well. But I think this probably works better at 2. I'm sure this works great at 3 and 4, but works better at 2 than the crew.
Yeah, gotcha. No, I'd hope to play with the full complement of 4, perhaps on a day. Play this, Bombusters, and that'll be 80 games between them to get through them all. But no, looking forward to playing this, and I think this was the 103rd Lord of the Ring theme board game, and I think Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth 102nd.
Well, I mean, there's obviously, so there was a promo pack that they put out called the Gifts of Galadriel. It's a bonus chapter. Sounds like Barry managed to find a copy. This is Asmodee's new system of functionally doing promos to support local brick and mortar stores. So you go out to buy the game in your local hobby store, and if they're signed up to Asmodee's program, then they'll have some of these to give one to you, and they're not allowed to distribute them online, allegedly. They were also available at cons, though. So, I don't know.
Most promos are, but yes, the leisure games.
Yeah. So if you go to Asmodee's website, you can find a list of shops that will have access to these promos. So if you're not sure where to get one or you really want one, you can go check that out on Asmodee's website and find out which stores who've signed up to their program have which games. And then, you can either go to the store or get in touch with them and find out if they've got it. But you will actually have to travel there to get the promo, I think.
Yes, had to go pick it up.
Yeah, it really depends, I suppose, on how strict the store is about that policy. But, that's probably a good thing. Yeah, they should be strict about it.
Nice. And then what else have you managed to get tabled, even if we're not going to go in depth?
Yeah, so that brings us to the sort of the wrap up of the episode, because I've got like another 5 games to talk about, but we're all out of time. And that's fine, because I think I need a little bit more time to sit with these games. So I'm going to tease them a little bit. And if there's anything you're particularly excited about, anything you'd like to hear a bit more about or hear us discuss, hear our thoughts on, you can always contact us, askreadysteadypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know, or you can comment on this. I think there's comments on Spotify now, which is a strange idea, but you can, if you're watching on YouTube. Feature. Yeah, a new feature. So you can always leave a comment, let us know. But I've been playing Inferno, which is a sort of mid to heavy, it's definitely like the heavier side of middleweight Euro game that came out at Essen this year. It was a big Kickstarter. So I think, it went to backers and came out. But this is the one where Dante is descending through the 9 levels of hell, and you are a noble family living in Florence who are managing the household and also, I guess, like consorting with the devils in some way, because you have a real interest in what's going on in hell. But I've played it a couple of times, but we've got some rules wrong. The rule book is terrible. I'm happy to review the rule book right now. It's bad. So I'd like to play it at least once more with the, I've got a lot of positive vibes from this. I really like what I've seen. And I don't think the rules errors we've made have really massively changed the experience of playing the game. But I'd like to give it one more crack at least before I dive into it on the podcast. I played that at 4 a couple of times already. I played Ascendancy, which was a huge Kickstarter from One More Turn Games, their first game. It's a chap called Matthew Meeple who designed it and published it and did everything with it. And it is just a huge box. And it sort of pulled some of its DNA, I suppose, from like Heroes of Might and Magic, because you're building up a civilization, a sort of fantasy civ, but you've also got a hero who'll go around and battle monsters and things like that. I was very lucky to play this in a TTS form with the designer, so I had some concept of how it worked before I sat down at the table with it. But I played it 2-player, and I had a relatively good time, and the other player also quite enjoyed it. So I think, there's some really interesting stuff here to talk about, but it does definitely suffer from an auteur with no editors or developers. And more on that later, but it also has this mechanism where you're putting out little settlements, building walls and towers to sort of protect your settlements. And that was very reminiscent of Uprising, Curse of the Last Emperor, which I played twice because because Mark, who I was playing Ascendancy with, was like, these are the same components from Uprising. Uprising is different. Ascendancy can be cooperative. It can be team-based. It can be competitive. It's, a big Kickstarter with all of the game modes. Uprising is very much a collaborative, cooperative game where you are effectively like little tribes of sort of fantasy people who are caught up in the giant war between the Chaos Horde and the Empire. So the Empire is sort of established on this fantasy map, and they've got all of these garrisons and things controlling all the lands. And you've been sort of a thorn in their side, I suppose, a little rebel faction who's fighting them off. And then suddenly from the frozen wastes comes the Chaos Horde, which is just these skeleton armies of undead minions and their giant monstrous overlords. And they are just cursing the lands, and they march on the Empire, and they're going to have a big sort of automated fight. And you're just in the background, like trying to earn like points while this is going on, trying not to die. And to win the game, you and your friend have to each have more points than either the Empire or the Horde. So they're going to be earning points for fighting each other and fighting you, and you're going to be earning points for fighting them. And so you have to work with your collaborator, even though you're quite independent functionally as different little civilizations, to make sure you both have more points than either of these other two factions. It's a huge Kickstarter thing again, with just the most insane acrylic minis I've ever seen. There's loads of them. They're massive. They're neon colored. They're all color printed. They're huge. The board becomes, I was about to say completely unreadable pretty quickly, but it's not totally unreadable. Like, it's actually easier to read than you would think if you looked at photos of this game, because it looks crazy. It's very, very dicey. Uprising comes with lots of dice. It's a very strange time. I enjoyed it. I'm not sure how on earth I could get better at it. We played twice because we lost the first game in record time, just because I wasn't super across the rules, and I just got like taken out of the game almost right away. The second game we won, which I think is actually quite difficult to do. So I was quite pleased about that, but it took a long time to do. We played, there is 4 eras. We played 3 eras. You can choose how many you're going to play. It's quite long, the game. But I don't know if there's like necessarily sort of a strategy that I can develop and deploy to be better at Uprising Curse of the Last Empire. It feels kind of like, it's sort of the Nemesis thing, like a roller coaster that you get on and you just ride it. And you can very easily mess up and derail the roller coaster, but you also can't really do so well that you redirect it or have any control over where it goes. All you can do is just make sure it doesn't come off the tracks. So that was really interesting. I don't know if I'll talk about Uprising more, but let me know if you are interested in it, and I can go into more detail. Red Dust Rebellion I played. This is the latest in the Coin series. I think it's game 12 in the Coin series. It is, so that's the counterinsurgency series from GMT Games. This is designed by Jared Carmichael, who you might know as 3 Minute Board Games. But this is not a 3-minute board game. This is a much longer all-day game. This takes a long time to play. So if you don't know Coin at all, it's sort of it's asymmetrical warfare. So famous warfares through history. Coin games have typically looked at the two I've played actually are the baby coins. So the Jest of Robin Hood, which is Robin Hood versus the Sheriff of Nottingham, and the British Way, which is about the Palestinian, the formation of Israel and the Palestinian state at the end of the Second World War, where you're playing against the Palestinian guerrilla fighters fighting off the British occupation. I have actually, and that's not true. I've also played Gandhi, which is, where you're functionally, one player is Gandhi in India, raising up sort of a religious movement against the oppressive state. It's, but there's also like, what's the Cuban one?
Just Cuba Libre, no?
Yeah, it's called Cuba Libre, and it's, the guerrilla fighters in Cuba and the rebellion there. So it tends to model these sort of really asymmetrical warfares. Red Dust Rebellion is the first one I can tell, or the first one I'm aware of, that does a fantastical setting. So this is set in the future once we've colonized Mars and partially terraformed it. And so it is somewhat livable, but still quite dangerous. And the four factions are the Mars government, who is the established government on Mars trying to keep control. They've also got some affiliation with the Earth government, and they're trying to sort of stay in the Earth government's good books as well. There is the corporations, who are trying to continue to terraform Mars, and so these are the Coin factions, the counterinsurgent factions, for those that know the games. And the corporations are trying to terraform Mars and extract profits by any means necessary. And they're working with the Mars government, who are trying to work with them, but also not, let them, destroy everything with their corporate ways. And then there are no allies in this game, but typically the Coin factions are the sort of loose allies. And then the other factions are typically sort of facing the overwhelming odds of the Coin factions, who have more power and resources. So they're sort of, the insurgents are not necessarily allied, but also their interests often align against overwhelming force. So then you've got the Red Dust Rebels, who are the laborers of Mars, who've been doing all the work and are now thinking like, we want more workers' rights, we want better rights, we want to live in the nice air domes instead of out in the desert. So they're rebelling against the corporations and against the Mars government. And then you've got the Church of the Reclaimer, who are religious fanatics who live out in the wilderness of the desert and have decided that they're going to evolve to become better people here on Mars, and kind of want to bring everyone into their cult, which they want to spread throughout the planet. So the Church of the Reclaimer and the Red Dust Rebels are sort of tense allies. But I've not played so much Coin that I can put this really into the context of the other Coin games for people who've played a lot of Coin and want to know where this fits in the series. It introduces some new mechanisms, particularly the Church of the Reclaimer, who use these asset cards that allow them to buy turn order. If you know the Coin system, the action you take, there's a sort of action and follow action. There's only 2 sort of activations available every round among 4 factions. But if you take an activation this round, typically you become ineligible to activate next round. And the whole game is kind of run by these event cards. This is common to all Coin games, as far as I'm aware, is run by these event cards that are going to progress the game and determine the turn order as well. So the Church of the Reclaimer actually always goes last in turn order on those cards, but can, before anyone starts to activate, choose to buy their position in turn order by sacrificing asset cards. And if they don't, they get to play those asset cards, which are by doing event actions. So they don't do the events as the normal factions do in Coin games. They've got their own events, and some of those events are like permanent upgrades as well, which are pretty bonkers and allow them to sort of generate quite a lot of power. So I think they're the most sort of weird and new thing to the Coin series in the game, if you're familiar with that. But there's a lot to talk about in Red Dust Rebellion. So if you want me to go into more detail, talk a bit more about that, or how it fits in with my limited experience of other Coin stuff, happy to do that.
Well, if that was the synopsis, must be a lot in there.
It's super heavy. I think it's like a 4.3 or something on
it was
BGG.
It's around that.
Very asymmetrical, and I think we ended in the second dust phase, which is the second scoring round of 3, and it took 8 hours. And
Yowzers.
3 of them had played before. I was the only one that was coming new to it, and I'm pretty good at this sort of thing. So, like, it's a long game. It's all day, and we played 2/3 of it reasonably. So, yeah. And then the last one I've been playing is Pax Penning, which is it even a PAX game? If you know, you know. But if you want to know more about Pax Penning, which is a little independent game about vying for control of Norway in medieval times or ancient times. Yeah, it's a tiny little sort of handcrafted game from Matilda Simonson. And I'm happy to talk more about that as well. But I need to play it again because it's very strange.
Cool. Well, hopefully people will leave comments saying what they want to hear more about.
Yeah, exactly right. And I can also talk about that big game of Thrones I've got coming up. The one that Barry really wants to play.
Oh, there's some news actually. Game of Thrones and Legendary.
Game of Thrones Legendary.
Yeah, not Legendary Encounters, however, which I would have been more interested in.
Right, that's the cooperative one, is Encounters, right?
Yeah, the sort of story based one.
Unfortunately, Game of Thrones is not very cooperative.
No, typically.
Typically, it's not. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Make sure you subscribe and turn on all the likes and do all the nice things. We really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed spending some time listening to us prattle on about board games, and that you have some lovely board game stuff planned for the future. None of this would be possible without the support of our wonderful backers on Patreon. We really appreciate you guys. If you'd like to support the show at all, you can go and check out patreon.com/ReadySteadyPlay. That covers this podcast, plus all the YouTubes and stuff like that.
Until next time, bye.